and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Make sure you join us for Afternoon Express this week.
Veteran actor Pope Gerard joins us in the loft.
We take a look at South Africa's brand new romantic comedy for Outdate.
Actress and comedian J. Governor chats to us about the kings and queens of comedy show in Durban.
And we look back at the highlights of SA Menswear Week in Cape Town.
Also, remember that we will be off air on Tuesday the 9th and Friday the 12th due to cricket.
From our loft to your living room, Afternoon Express weekdays at 4 p.m. Find it on 3.
We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Eben Jansen. The show is always live. It's broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also live on YouTube. That's our streaming facility. You can watch us anywhere in the world at any time via the live streaming on our YouTube channel. Now, today's question deals with rhino farming. It's been in the courts here in South Africa. It's causing a lot of debate. Today we'll have proponents for and against rhino farming here in South Africa. We'd love to get your views on that question at SABC Newsroom. Of course, there's lots of other things that's been going on over the last 24 hours in the world of news. Let's go to Elvis for the news update.
Thank you, Eben. Let's take it from the top. Judgment has been reserved in the Constitutional Court hearing on the powers of the public protector. Preparations ahead of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address tomorrow evening are well underway. And Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Bernie Sanders score victories in the New Hampshire primary for their respective parties in the U.S. presidential race. Now those are some of your highlights. More coming up just after this with Kendall Makamate in your sports news. A very good morning to you.
Thank you very much, Elvis. And good morning to you and to you at home as well. This is what we have for you in the sports today.
3 wins in a row for the first time this season for the Amakosi Kaizer Chiefs.
Kaizer Chiefs remind log leaders of their presence as Steve Compella leads them to victory over Bedwest.
Quinton de Kock, you beauty.
Quinton de Kock and Hashim Amla power the Proteas to a record run chase at Centurion to keep South Africa in the hunt for a series win.
Well, that's quite a shot there to seal it for Sri Lanka. Well played.
A new look Sri Lanka sounds a warning ahead of the World Cup, beating India by 5 wickets in Pune. Be sure to stick around for that at about 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this morning. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment in the Nkandla report. This after robust legal arguments from lawyers representing all interested parties, including the Democratic Alliance, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the National Assembly Speaker, the Police Minister, and President Jacob Zuma.
We accept it's not just a recommendation. She wanted certain things done, and the undertaking is that those things should be done.
And several other concessions followed, including that the Constitutional Court may have jurisdiction to hear the matter. Another concession, only a court can review the public protector's findings and not a police ministry's report.
We, as you would have seen, place no reliance on that. There is a sense in which it is res inter alios acta for present circumstances.
The President's legal team now contradicting what he said in a letter to the public protector, as quoted here by her counsel.
I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that reports of the public protector
and he quotes the Public Protector, are by law not subject to any review or second guessing by a minister and or cabinet.
From then on, it was all too easy for the applicants, but not for the police minister. His lawyer had some explaining to do. How were all the upgrades security related? Why was the president not liable to pay back any money?
The minister's hands actually were tied. He has to make sure that as part of an executive, he has to perform a duty given to him by the National Assembly, and he will only be wrong if he does that duty not in accordance with the instruction.
And then came another concession, this time from the National Assembly.
There is no gainsaying, Chief Justice, that Parliament acted on a wrong principle, thinking at the time that the principle was correct.
From where the main litigants sit, Parliament didn't cover itself in glory in this episode.
And they adopted overturned all of the findings of the Public Protector and adopted the Minister of Police's report instead. That's not holding to account, that's whitewashing.
They rubber-stamped a whitewashing, if I may call it that, of the excess. We would submit paints a picture which demonstrates what we would call a big picture of
Judgment has been reserved. Aldrin Simpier, SABC News, Constitutional Court.
Now, earlier, contributing editor Vuyo Mvoko spoke to constitutional law expert Komotso Moshikaro from the University of Cape Town. And he started by asking him whether he was surprised by how President Jacob Zuma's lawyers accepted the decision.
There had been a similar case that the DA had instituted in court against the SABC. And in that case, there are two separate judgments that have very, very different views about exactly what the powers of the Public Protector are. There is the Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, which basically avers the position that the EFF lawyers took. But then again, there is the High Court judgment. And the High Court actually took a view that really could have been in support of the president, arguably, if one interpreted that judgment very broadly. So it was rather surprising that they actually effectively conceded the absolute binding effect of the Public Protector's report.
From where you sit, I mean, someone like me who's a layman, I would have thought that even though they would concede at the end of the day, I would have thought that they would have at least flagged some critical issues. Were there simply no issues, or did they just think, let's forget about it?
I mean, it may have been a matter of strategy, so you're reading the bench and you know your audience, and perhaps they just think that it wasn't worth the time to waste on that, and rather maybe they can get concessions elsewhere. But really, there are actual reasons to be concerned about overbroad powers being given to the Public Protector. I mean, our constitutional scheme really does envisage what we would call a separation of powers. And that's not just a principle that applies to the president and to courts and the legislature, but also to Chapter 9 institutions. We need their powers to be carefully circumscribed whilst still being effective. And the kind of argument brought forward by both the EFF lawyers and the DA's lawyers call for a very radical interpretation of what the Public Protector's powers are. And we all have to remember that ultimately, institutions outlive their current occupants. So what happens when someone of less ethical or moral fiber than Thuli Madonsela occupies the office of the Public Protector? Remember, her term as Public Protector is soon coming to an end, and it's non-renewable. What then? Who chooses the Public Protector? It's obviously the National Assembly, the ANC-led government. So we need to be careful when we give overbroad powers to a particular personality just simply because of their moral standing. We actually have to think beyond the facts of this case. And it calls for a lot of concern that there wasn't much discussion about that point in the court today.
But why should that be an issue if one takes into account, I mean, why do we have a Public Protector in the first instance? Is it not because we have to protect the most vulnerable in society? So why should the focus be on curtailing their powers instead of giving them more, for argument's sake?
Well, this is also because judgments also outlive the current court as well. So we can't all just simply rely on the fact that the public protector is designed to protect the interests of the very, very vulnerable. The real question is about how far she can go in protecting that vulnerable group. No one before the court today was in any way disputing the fact that the public protector's powers have to be effective, to use the words of the EFF's lawyer, Mr. Trengrove. However, the question of how effective is still up for debate. The constitutional text is not very clear about that. It only calls for appropriate remedial action. And even before it gets to that, it specifically says that Parliament may regulate the powers of the public protector. So all of this is still very ambiguous, and the only way we can go about trying to figure out what it means is that we actually have to consider all the interests at work here, the interests that work in favor of the public protector and for a broader reading of her powers, but also the interests that actually call for a rather more moderate interpretation of her powers. We can't always just jump the gun, as it were, and just simply decide the facts in favor of the position we already hold. The Constitution itself must guide us first.
Now, that's an ongoing discussion which we'll keep you abreast of. Now, remember that is part of your news for now. We're asking you a very important question, and that relates to rhino farming. Can rhino farming save the rhino? That's our question to you. You can send us your comments to the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. You can also like us on the Facebook page. If you like us there, become part and parcel of this growing family and Newsroom, and you can post your comments. Evan.
Yeah, Elvis, let's get straight into the issue of the day. I can't seem to get the issue of my tie right this morning, but this is the story. On the 26th of November last year, the courts lifted the ban on the domestic trade in rhino horn here in South Africa, which was implemented by the government nearly 7 years ago. And two of South Africa's largest private rhino breeders, John Hume and Johan Kruger, have been fighting a legal battle to overturn the moratorium, saying that it's their constitutional right to sell rhino horn. The government launched an appeal against the court's decision, but that appeal was dismissed. Now there's been a lot of support and criticism for rhino farming, but the question everybody really wants to know, can this help to save the rhino? This is John Hume's side of the story.
But especially white rhino, are the most wonderful animals you'll ever meet in your life. I think it always was controversial from a point of view of because you dehorn rhino. I dehorned rhino first of all to save my rhinos' lives. I had the first rhino poached in Mpumalanga in 2006, and we immediately dehorned all the rhino. And then for 2 or 3 years we had no poaching. Then it crept in again, and I think the problem there was that people began to realize when you dehorn a rhino, it's rather like your nail. You cut off the dead part, but the live part is still there. I saw a woman, I think she was, I forget which animal rights movement she was, on TV saying to dehorn rhinos is wrong. And up came a picture of a rhino with half its face hacked off. So, I mean, that was a blatant lie. I'm a full-time veterinarian. I have 4 managers, 3 admin ladies, a fully qualified vet nurse running our hand rear section. Security costs in the last few months have gone from 600,000 Rand a month to 3 million Rand a month. And I can't see that going down, quite frankly. I don't sell any rhino because my life's ambition is to breed 200 rhino a year. One of the problems that our policies have landed us with, and that is that a rhino is worth more dead than alive. Because what I'm doing here is simply not sustainable. If I sold all of my progeny every single year, I would come nowhere near paying the running costs. I will fail. Every single policy is against me and, unfortunately, against the rhino. Why can you share a sheep and sell the wool, and not take the rhino's horns off and sell the horn and keep the rhino. If I'm able to sell my sustainable product, I will keep the poachers away. If I can't, I will fail to keep them away. So who to my project is worse than the poacher? The person who's keeping my money away to pay for my project. And that person is the anti-legal trader. The anti-legal trader because he does not want me to trade my horn legally. So therefore, if he's an anti-legal trader, by implication, surely he must be a pro-illegal trader. Because if he's anti-legal, he must be pro-illegal. And therefore, he's not only on the side of the poacher, but he's keeping the money away from me to protect my rhino. So he, therefore, must be worse than the poacher for my product. And my project will be killed by him more than the poacher. So the anti-legal trader is more of an enemy to my rhinos than the actual poacher.
That's John Hume's story. Now, although there's been some public support for rhino farming and domestic trade, there are those who have great concerns that the ban being lifted on rhino farming may cause more harm than good. There's also the belief that these wild animals should not be exploited for their horns for the sake of profit. Now, joining us via Skype from the Drakensberg, he's the chairman of the Focused Africa Foundation, Nigel Morgan, who is totally against rhino farming. A very good morning to you, Nigel. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ian.
Nigel, let me start at the top. I want to start with a recent court case. In light of this ban's been lifted and government's appeals been dismissed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it looks like we've got to one of those sort of AIDS moments again, where the South Africa is going to be head-to-head with the international community, which is unfortunate in so much that South Africa is hosting the Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species, CITES, in September this year. So at the moment, according to the judgment, we can have a regulated market in rhino horn within South Africa when it's banned by CITES internationally. That is a dilemma.
Tell us your stance against rhino farming. Why do you think rhino farming would be to the detriment of conserving the species?
Well, first of all, one has to be sympathetic with Mr. Hume. He's a farmer, and if it pays, it stays. And I think where he turns the case upside down is saying that those people who see the danger of having a regulated market are somehow the enemy of rhino conservation. Let me show you, and I think there are two countries that people should look at as a success story for survival of the rhinos. One is Swaziland, and the other one is Botswana. And if you look at the way that they've dealt with it with political leadership, with draconian legislation, and good enforcement. And that has managed to drive the poachers, unfortunately, out of those countries and probably into South Africa. The solution to the rhino problem is quite simple. In the long term, it's about demand reduction. This is not impossible. It's been done with the shark fins. It has led to an 80% reduction in the consumption of shark fins in its primary market in China. It is something that can only be dealt with if you've got a government that is prepared to cooperate with the international community in applying pressure to the consuming nations, diplomatically and through NGOs and through the use of agents of influence, as it were, like pop stars and others. In the medium term, we've got to educate people in this country that conservation is vital to the economy and it's important to their heritage. This is what's called social development, bringing the people within the conservation mold, as it were. And in the short term, which is cutting the supply side, we have got to deal not so much with these the poachers at the bottom end, which is the job of the rangers, who are doing a very good job, but the impossible job, because for every one they capture or kill, there'll be another 100 who will take it because of the money involved. It's going for these organized criminal syndicates run by Chinese and Vietnamese triads who reach into our whole bureaucracy, into our police and into upper government levels, who are the ones who are financing and organizing the pipeline for which the product is going out to its market.
What are some of the other negatives you think of rhino farming and the trade in it, especially the kind of stockpiles of rhino horn that you're left with if you can't trade, and this then somehow finds its way onto the market, doesn't it?
Yes, I think the precedent here is the Kimberley process, which you might recall was about blood diamonds, trying to reduce the flow of blood diamonds. And what ended up in the end was it ended up with a fig leaf for the same bad behavior. Only this time it was legalized. What you do if you legalize these in a chaotic, criminalized market at the moment is you're going to get black, grey product being legalized into the regulated market. Now, historically, and if we look at ivory, they tried about 10 years ago to flood the market with the aim of reducing the price. It didn't succeed. All the evidence shows that if you supply a market, you feed it, you increase the demand. What we need to do is reduce the demand and then also hit, through good intelligence, good disruptive operations, counter-operations, the syndicates who are dealing with this, because they're the same syndicates who are dealing in drugs, human trafficking, and other illegal transit of goods.
The trick you mentioned is the reducing the demand, and the risk, of course, is the increase of the demand. What do you see as an ideal way to look at reducing the demand?
Well, I think CITES in September, with South Africa hosting it, is a very good opportunity to bring this to the top of the agenda. And what the government needs to be doing is to galvanize the international community to the problem. We're still losing over 1,000 rhinos a year in South Africa. It's not sustainable. And farming will never replace those losses. What we need to do is we need to get international support. We've got it from the United States government. We've got it from the British government and other European governments. And indeed, even the Chinese are coming to the table and realizing this is bad for their international image in Africa, which is one of the major destinations for investment these days.
Well, Nigel, I thank you for joining us today. Nigel Morgan is the chairman of the Focus Africa Foundation. He came to us live from the Drakensberg this morning, giving us his views on why he is against rhino farming. He believes that, well, this will increase the demand internationally if we do, which is a massive risk that, of course, the rhinos can't afford. Of course, just to contextualize it, a South African judge last year lifted the domestic ban on the trade in rhino horn in a direct challenge to government's policy put in place in 2009 to try and stem the rocketing poaching numbers. Of course, over 1,100 rhino died in the last calendar year. Of course, everyone has a view on it. Donald Blair talks about play warframe. You should make it easier to get rhino prime, been farming all day and only got the blueprint. I don't quite know what Donald is saying, to be honest. David Shipley says, I'd assume that legalizing farming of rhino horn would be a good thing for rhinos. Horn grows back, so no killing required. Those against it, David, they say they worry about increasing the demand. Keith Martin talks about farming endangered species to sell their products threatens wild populations, says Keith Martin, MD. P. Cole talks about, I read that rhino horns can grow back. How is farming rhinos not a more common thing? Can elephant tusks grow back? No, elephant tusks, they can't grow back their teeth. Kate talks about farming rhino horn is not the answer to curbing the trade. If nothing else, anesthetizing the animals has a higher risk factor. Yes, we have to find a way. We have to find a way. We have to find a way to deal with it. Rhino horn, our question of the day, deals with rhino farming. It's a controversial subject here in South Africa. Of course, in a legal challenge, well, rhino farming, domestic trade in rhino horn is now allowed. The question we ask you is, can rhino farming save the rhino? What do you think? Those against it say no, they'll increase the demand and it could be a catastrophe. Others say, well, it grows back 15 times every year, so you might as well just cut the rhino off and farm it. And it's a sustainable way of hanging on to your rhinos. Anyhow, other news from around the world. Let's just take a look. What's on in Europe? The Times reports that motorists face being limited to less than a glass of wine or even a pint of beer before they get behind the wheel, and the plans to bring England and Wales in line with Scottish reforms as ministers are holding talks over cutting the drink driving limit for the first time in almost 50 years. Then in Germany, the Frankfurter Allgemeine says a head-on crash between two commuter trains in southern Germany left at least 10 people dead and scores injured. Then finally, the International New York Times reports that Donald Trump recovered from a second-place finish in Iowa to win the New Hampshire primary. And if Donald Trump wins the election, many Americans will move to South Africa. Now, let's take a quick look at what's happening in the courts here in South Africa today. We'll start in Johannesburg here, where the sentencing proceedings in the case against Donald Sebolai is expected to begin in the Johannesburg High Court, sitting at the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court. Sebolai, of course, was convicted of murdering his girlfriend, Rachel Dolly Chabalala, in October of last year. Then, in Cape Town, the hearing into the alleged misconduct by sports scientist, nutritionist, banting expert Tim Noakes is expected to resume. The Health Committee has laid a complaint of misconduct against Noakes over his support of the banting diet. Then, still in Cape Town, the drunken driving case against ANC National Executive Committee member Tony Ngeni is expected to continue in the Cape Town Magistrates Court. Ngeni was previously granted 5,000 rand bail in this case. Time for us now to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion around rhino farming. We're asking you the question today: can rhino farming save the rhino? Some say yes, others say no. What do you think? It makes sense. A rhino horn grows back 15 times in one rhino's lifetime. What do you think? Farming makes sense? After the break, we'll pick it up. Elvis will be here with a very interesting interview.
And I'm Prabhakshani Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, Anheuser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally. Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and your world on SABC News.
Now we continue our theme today on rhino farming, and the population of rhinos has decreased in South Africa in recent years as poachers have been relentless. Last month, the Minister of Environmental Affairs, Edna Molewa, revealed that a total of 1,175 rhino were poached in South Africa in 2015. Of those, 826 were in the Kruger National Park. Now, with the population decreasing drastically every year, the question remains, can rhino farming save the rhino? Now, to find out, we are now joined by Julian Sturgeon, Executive Director and the Acting CEO of Resource Africa. Julian, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
First and foremostly, Julian, for those who don't know, can you just maybe explain a little bit more in terms of what rhino farming is all about?
Well, there's essentially two issues. The first is to do with the fact that rhinos are being poached virtually to extinction, and essentially, if not now, in the very near future, we are going to look at drastically reduced populations in South Africa and, of course, in Africa as a whole. And the issue really revolves around the demand for rhino horn. And I think that that's something that is constantly being ignored by the anti-legal traders. The fact is that demand for rhino horn it's just gone ballistic.
And why is that?
We used to. Well, let me try and explain that. Not terribly long ago, 30 years ago, we used to trade in rhino horn. People were allowed to buy and sell rhino horn. It was stopped in 1977. The international trade, I mean. And at that time, Africa was losing round about anywhere between 15 and 30 animals a year. That situation is no longer the case. And the reason is that demand has gone through the roof. Demand used to mostly reside in the fact that rhino horn was part and parcel of Chinese traditional medicine, and that's why it continued to be used. And that's been a trade that has existed for probably 2,000 to 3,000 years. We're not too sure, but it's certainly a very, very long time that rhino horn has been used. Nowadays, that situation is completely different. The demand for horn for medicinal purposes maybe constitutes between 5 and 10% of their total demand. The rest of it is all about bling. Mm-hmm. It's about personal adornments, carvings, just having an entire rhino horn as an ornament. That's where the demand resides, and that has come about because of the vast change that's come about in Asia in the last 20 years in terms of disposable wealth, and I think bling well captures exactly what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. So, the traditional uses for horn are becoming, a drop in the ocean. It's all about bling. It's about fashion. It's about looking good. It's like buying a Ferrari.
Now, will rhino farming then not increase that demand for rhino horn?
Well, the first point about that argument is that the demand is already catastrophically high. Okay, and to now say that creating a legal supply, a sustainable legal supply of rhino is going to increase demand actually doesn't make any economic sense whatsoever. We simply do not know the answer to that question. But the fact is that whether we do it or not, whether we institute legal supply chains for farming, for rhino, the illegal killing will continue. It will continue. And that's why all these anti-trade people, they talk as though there was some solution in the offing, namely that one day this rhino trade, this illegal trade is going to stop. It's not. It's going to continue until there's no more rhinos. Mm-hmm. That's the first point that needs to be grasped.
So are you suggesting then that rhino farming is a sustainable method of preserving the rhino?
Well, certainly, of conserving the rhino, because we're talking about the utilization of the animal's horn, which is, as you have heard, it grows back. It is a sustainable source. Okay, a bull rhino can grow 1.5 kilograms of horn in a year, and remember, the street price is estimated at $100,000 a kilogram. That makes rhinos the most valuable land animal on Earth, and right now, a dead rhino is worth one heck of a lot more than a live rhino. It's worth about 5 times as much as a live rhino. And that is because of the ban on trade. Now, the whole issue of opening up trade needs to be carefully understood. It's not. There will always be consequences from any action of this type. And the point is that it's got to be done with, as a collective exercise, with cooperation between governments and organizations to make this happen and to make it transparent. That's the most important thing. And what's vitally important is that these people who are currently organizing the trade, they must now be encouraged to come and buy the legal horn. That's what will stop them killing our rhinos.
So if it makes...
It's absolutely critical.
So if it makes conservation sense and if it makes economic sense, have you then engaged government on this particular issue to make sure that rhino farming is probably the way to go?
Well, we certainly have engaged government on this issue, and I'd just like to remind your listeners that the Department of Environmental Affairs arranged a series of public hearings last year, which were highly successful, and which, if I'm not mistaken, a good 120 presentations were made to government, to this panel that had been set up by the department, and it was a panel of experts. Well, they didn't call it that, but that's essentially what it boiled down to. There was a wide range of conservationists, farmers, practitioners of one sort or another involved in the rhino issue. And the figures that we have got back from that exercise of public hearings was that well over 70% of the presentations to that panel were in support of establishing a legal trade, and we ourselves made a presentation where we promoted the idea of farming. But ours is slightly different because we are promoting community farms. We believe that communities living adjacent to protected areas should be encouraged and supported to start farming rhino and game generally, but in a way where they can provide more protection than sandparks can. Sandparks is limited by the fact that Kruger Park is a massive tourist attraction, and to police it is an immense task. And Sandparks is doing a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong. I think Sandparks are doing a magnificent job. But they cannot stop the poaching. It's impossible. It is simply impossible. No matter how much effort and how much money is spent, they will never stop that poaching. The only way to go is to create different channels. And especially if the animal itself is so valuable, this can become a valuable source of income and job creation as well as protection for these marvelous creatures, you know. But
Julian,
I'll stop there.
Julian, thank you so much for your time. That was Julian Sturgeon. He's the Executive Director and Acting CEO of Resource Africa, and he says it could be a sustainable resource if we look after it and we engage the communities. Eben, we asked that very important question. Can rhino farming save the rhino? You can let us know what's on your mind. Over to Eben.
Yeah, Elvis, we're going to give the last word today to Sandparks. I'll speak to them in a couple of minutes' time. But, of course, there's some other goings on this week. We've got the State of the Nation address tomorrow evening, of course, tomorrow as well. It marks the 50th anniversary of the forced removals from District 6 in Cape Town. Now, on February 11, 1966, District 6 was declared a white area under the Group Areas Act of the time. More than 60,000 people were relocated. A way of life, culture was destroyed. Now, let's take a look at some of your tweets. Lou Yates talks about District 6 Museum, a living memorial to forced rehousing and a witness to inhumanity. Should be a World Heritage Site. Yes, Lou, it will be 50 years tomorrow, and we'll do a special focus here on Newsroom on it. Coaching says, District 6 people used to live there? I did. The pain lives on. Rural Development and Land Reform Department talks about the walk will be down Keisergracht Street with banners representing District 6 communities and other communities affected by forced removals. Yes, that'll happen tomorrow. The vigil will be at 11 o'clock and we'll be live there. Brad Bart talks about 50 years since District 6 declaration that led to destruction. Commemorative walk starts at 11 a.m. at the Homecoming Centre. at the District 6 Museum. Yes, there's also a vigil on that vacant piece of land. As you come into Cape Town, you can't miss it. Nothing's been built there for more than 20 years. It's a painful memory of what we went through here in South Africa. Tomorrow is 50 years since forced removal started District 6. We'll be dedicating our show to most of it. But we've got other news today. Let's have a look what we've put on our Facebook page for you today. Now, some political parties in Parliament, they are hoping for a State of the Nation address that will be free of interruptions when President Jacob Zuma addresses the nation tomorrow. Then, business has welcomed government's commitment to implement new measures to improve cooperation. Yesterday, President Jacob Zuma met with the country's top business leaders in Cape Town. Also, Ajax Cape Town is yet to decide whether they will honour their first-round CAF Confederation Cup match against Sagrada Esperança of Angola. Interesting how that one will develop. Of course, Botswana team has already been fined. They were called Chiefs. Anyhow, all of these stories and more on our Facebook page. Now, after the break, we continue with our discussion on rhino. The final word today goes to Sand Parks. What do they think about rhino farming? We want to know what you think about rhino farming. Here it is. Can rhino farming save the rhino? We are at crisis point with regards to rhino poaching on the African continent. After the break, we'll continue this discussion.
Good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
Hello again. You're watching Newsroom. Our focus today is rhino farming. Now, the latest research into rhino poaching suggests that legalizing the trade of rhino wool will in part lead to a decline in the unnecessary deaths of rhino on the African continent. When a rhino is dehorned in a responsible manner, it grows back to its original length within 2 years. Some researchers say South Africa trading in white rhino horn is a massive opportunity. Rhino trading has been banned since the late 1970s, and as such, the ban has only contributed to, well, an increase in illegal poaching. Now, to discuss rhino farming, we're joined in studio by Dr. Sam Ferreira. He is a large mammals ecologist with Sand Parks here in South Africa. Dr. Ferreira, thank you for your patience and thank you for being with us.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers.
Now, Dr. Ferreira, I want to go back to, if you can kind of give us an overview, what in your view is rhino farming and how is this different from what we would see as conventional rhino conservation?
I think there's a couple of clarities that we need to have out. I think the very first thing is that South Africa has got a responsibility to look after our own biological heritage, and that's not just rhinos. And on top of that, we must do it in a way where all South Africans can share in the benefits that accrue from our conservation successes. If you now look at farming, and I think what the difficulty in this discussion is, we tend to think about farming just for farming for rhino horn. When in effect, there is a bunch of private people that has got properties that will have wildlife, including rhinos, on their properties. There are very few people that keep rhinos on a property for the sake of the rhinos, to save rhinos.
Yeah.
They do it to make some profit out of it. The conservation of rhinos may just be a secondary outcome of wanting to make a business from it. So that's the one part, okay? So there's lots of reasons why people may want to have rhinos on there, and it's not solely just to have to harvest horn. The second thing is there's different kinds of farming. So, for example, extensive ranching, which includes very large areas where rhinos can walk free, they can choose who they mate with, they find their own food and their water, etc. And those extensive areas are normally within the natural distribution. Now, if you look at South Africa's conservation context, it's obvious that extensive ranching approaches, even if it is just for a rhino, have got consequences for a variety of other species as well. So in that context, an extensive ranching approach to farming can make significant contributions to conservation, including that of the rhinos. And the challenge comes when you are dealing with intensive approaches, and this is often happening on small areas where rhinos are being fed and they are outside the natural distribution. Okay. You are removing all the processes that are normally making a rhino strong and able to survive in the wild.
What we call battery, is that like battery farming for chickens in a way?
I wouldn't call it specifically that way, because we definitely don't constrain rhinos much like that, but it is an example of how you remove the natural processes that rhinos will experience. And then typically what happens in those type of cases is that you effectively busy domesticate a species. And I think this is where the concern comes in that was raised by some of the previous speakers.
Yeah.
The additional thing is, so we've identified the different farming options that are sitting out there. Our history of conservation in rhinos in South Africa is an incredible achievement. We took rhinos on the brink of extinction through the initiatives of guys like the late Dr. Ian Player, to the point where we've got roughly about 20,000 rhinos in South Africa right now. And by the way, this has not been decreasing. We've been maintaining that roughly over the last 5 years. But historically, we solidified our rhinos first before we made it available for people to buy and have it on their private properties, use it legally, like hunting and watching it, etc., etc. So the primary thing here is that farming per se is not an activity that's directed specifically to conserve rhinos. It's an activity that's directed specifically to make money. But if you do it in an extensive, large area within the distribution of rhinos, then you make a true contribution to the conservation of rhinos. And I think that's the reality that we have to face.
The other reality that was raised today, which I think is a bit of a red flag in the whole process, now Nigel Morgan earlier told me he believes this will increase the demand for rhino if we make more rhino horn readily available. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I think that you will hear enormous amount of speculations about what the consequences might be if we were to legalize trade, whether it is in a national context, like what just has happened, or whether it is an international context. And I think the reality is this: we can perhaps look at some cases before. The usual case when a particular trade ban is lifted typically takes place at a time when poaching is not threatening a particular species. In other words, it comes back to the thing that you are in control of your conservation asset already. And that creates opportunities to actually make use of commodities, including rhino horn, in future, and so forth. So I think Julian might have highlighted a bit earlier that the reality is you have to get in control of things that are busy going wrong. And in South Africa's case, we should focus on the things that we can do ourselves. The provision of that safety and security in the areas where rhinos are and where people are that are living next to rhinos, next to parks. The responsibility of giving people equal opportunities to share benefits with, from our protected areas. And that has to happen irrespective of whether you are trading in rhino horn or not. That has to happen irrespective if it involves rhinos or not.
It's a question all farmers.
It's
a question all farmers have to confront here in South Africa. Not just rhino farmers, one would think, and that is sharing the proceeds of the land with everyone. Increases security, increases stability, all those beautiful things we want to. In conclusion, as Sandparks, Dr. Ferreira, what would you like to see happening in the short term, medium term, with regards to rhino farming?
I think in the short and in the medium term, the immediate thing is actually to exploit the opportunities of extensive areas that are available, for instance, in some of our rural community areas and so forth. And it doesn't have to start with actually rhinos first. You can actually do this as a broad principle for people wanting to be involved in the wildlife economy, including rhinos.
Okay, Dr. Ferreira, I thank you for that contribution today. I'm sure it's a discussion that you hear about daily. That's Dr. Sam Ferreira. He's a large mammal ecologist with South African National Parks, Sandparks here in South Africa. You heard what he says. They're very much for it, but it has to be done properly, like everything and everything. The thing that stands out for me, rhino security, poaching security, it's all linked with involving communities around our national parks in caring for and sharing the benefits of farming of wild animals and the conservation process that so much money is being made of. It stands clear, and here on Newsroom we'll delve into that in the next couple of weeks. How are we getting our communities involved? Are we doing it? Of course, we would love you to send us your response to the question of the day. That is, can rhino farming save the rhino? That was our question. There it is. It's back on the screen. Can rhino farming save the rhino? Passionately, so we ask you today. Now, moving on, last night, the Proteas finally beat England. A win that keeps the series alive. England leading 2-1 with 2 matches to play. Of course, on Friday, it's the pink day here in Johannesburg. Looking forward to that. Depeche says, that was a very impressive innings from the Cock yesterday. He's turning out to be a superstar for SA cricket in the shorter format. Depeche, they must bat him at the top of the order in the test side as well, man. Let's change the game. Maponyani says, great knock by Hashim Amla. Welcome back. Thanks, Mups. You're a sober man. Damien Hines says, our bowlers will have a lot to prove at the Wanderers. Miller should come in and we should bat first if we win a toss for once. Alwyn Hendricks, wasn't that a lovely 100 by Quinny last night? Well done. Yes, but I think the one in Bloemfontein was even better. He could have scored 200 on the night. He was so good, this young man. Time for us now to close this hour by taking a look at the weather with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eben. Well, as we take a look at what's going on in your weather, we're going to start off with the Central African regions here. No surprises, we're seeing a cloud cover already over the region, and we're going to see cloud cover continuing throughout almost the entire day throughout that region. We're also seeing cloud cover. It was a bit of a cloudy start to the day up here in Johannesburg. In South Africa, of course, we're expecting that to last throughout the morning. It should burn off and then later this afternoon return with storms and thunderstorms. In fact, in terms of your rainfall, you can see this morning we expected showers over South Africa's northeastern areas, as well as, of course, showers all the way throughout Central Africa's regions there. And as we take a look through the day, we're going to see the intensification of rainfall over the central and the far western interior of Southern Africa and Central Africa as well. We're also going to see some storms making their way around the Highveld, around Johannesburg, and even towards the northwest province here in South Africa. Stormy conditions forecast there. And as you can see today, warm ones as well. Pretoria peaks at 32 degrees. Quite a lot of cloud cover forecast there for today. You can also see that rainfall making its way towards Gaborone there, 37-degree maximums and a hot one there. Uppington, a 39-degree high with no rainfall, and this means conditions highly conducive to the spread of veld fires. Please be aware of that if you are in the area. Some devastating veld fires already been seen in that area there. Lusaka's at 29 degrees, Lilongwe 28, moving north, temperatures rising up to about 32 degrees along the coastline around Dar es Salaam as well as Mombasa. If you're going to be in the interior, expect slightly heavier rainfall Kigali at 28 degrees as well. It's going to be a warm one there. Afternoon showers forecast for Massawa, but in general, very, very light rainfall in the area. For the rest of the region, just expect a little bit of lower level cloud cover over Addis Ababa and Djibouti. The surrounding regions peaking around the mid to higher 20s. Now, very, very chilly temperatures forecast in Tehran for today, a 3-degree maximum, even though we're seeing some sunny skies. As you can see, Dubai peaking at 26 degrees. Further west from these regions, though, we're expecting that cloud cover to make its way into the area. This is behind the frontal system, which passed through over the past few days, has resulted in slightly cooler temperatures, and another frontal system which has just passed the Algiers and Tunis area there, bringing rainfall to that area, 19 and 18 degree highs. As we look towards the western African regions, at least the more populated regions here, we're expecting a drier day. So for the most part, we're just expecting some light rainfall over the lesser populated areas. The bigger cities, though, a dry one, just partly cloudy skies over most of West Africa there. Back into the western parts of Central Africa, this, as we said, is where we can expect quite a lot of rainfall and the intensification of showers later this afternoon. Kinshasa at 32 degrees, Brazzaville 31, midday showers also forecast for these areas. And as you can see, it makes its way all the way to the coastline. Now, this is where you can contact us with your feedback. Email us at weather@sabc.co.za or give us a call 011 714 5077. This is where I leave the weather for now. Stay tuned.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned.
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened.
I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't. Who are you asking? You're looking at me?
Yes, Abed, I'm talking to you.
So the old fuddy-duddies like Dennis and me will remain there?
I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about... Damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
So much more than just the Legal and Rights show. Join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on the SABC News channel. News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally, continentally, and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
The son of Africa, Trevor Noah, is leaving America in stitches.
I never dreamed that I would one day have, well, two things really. An indoor toilet and a job as host of The Daily Show.
We are the first to bring you the latest films around the globe.
Dear white people, the minimum requirement of black friends needed to not seem racist has just been raised to 2.
Cobbins Esako is a gifted blind musician, a master of soothing notes from the piano.
I love to sit behind the piano. You know, that also helps me find inspiration.
Join Refula Mulwa every Friday for that 1-hour weekly dose of art and entertainment news at 9 p.m. on Trends.
SABC News, we report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Wednesday, the 10th of February 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studio, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. The question of the day that we're posing to you is, can rhino farming save the rhino? That's your question. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Also like us on the Facebook page and post your comments there. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. Judgment has been reserved in the constitutional hearing on the powers of the public protector. Preparations ahead of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address tomorrow evening are well underway. And in the U.S., Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Bernie Sanders score victories in the New Hampshire primary for their respective parties in the U.S. presidential race. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Quite a lot happening in the football front. A lot of people quite excited at what's happening with that, as well as in cricket. Good morning to you. This is what we have for you in the sports today.
3 wins in a row for the first time this season for the Amakosi Kaizer Chiefs.
Kaizer Chiefs remind log leaders of their presence as Steve Compella leads them to victory over Bidvest Wits.
Quinton de Kock, you beauty.
Quinton de Kock and Hashim Amla power the Proteas to a record run chase at Centurion to keep South Africa in the hunt for a series win.
Well, that's quite a shot there to seal it for Sri Lanka. Well played.
A new look Sri Lanka sounds a warning ahead of the World Cup, beating India by 5 wickets in Pune. As you can see, we've got quite a loaded show for you later on in the sports, so be sure to stick around for that in 20 minutes or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. Top story this hour. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment in the Nkandla report case. Now, this after robust legal arguments from lawyers representing all the interested parties, including the Democratic Alliance, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the National Assembly Speaker, the Police Minister, and President Jacob Zuma.
We accept it's not just a recommendation. She wanted certain things done, and the undertaking is that those things should be done.
And several other concessions followed, including that the Constitutional Court may have jurisdiction to hear the matter. Another concession, only a court can review the Public Protector's findings and not a police ministry's report.
We, as you would have seen, place no reliance on that. There is a sense in which it is res inter alios acta for present circumstances.
The President's legal team now contradicting what he said in a letter to the Public Protector, as quoted here by her counsel.
I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that reports of the Public Protector, and he quotes the Public Protector, are by law not subject to any review or second guessing by a minister and or cabinet.
From then on, it was all too easy for the applicants, but not for the police minister. His lawyer had some explaining to do. How were all the upgrades security related? Why was the President not liable to pay back any money?
The minister's hands actually were tied. He has to make sure that as part of an executive, he has to perform a duty given to him by the National Assembly, and he will only be wrong if he does that duty not in accordance with the instruction.
And then came another concession, this time from the National Assembly.
There is no gainsaying, Chief Justice, that Parliament acted on a wrong principle, thinking at the time that the principle was correct.
From where the main litigants sit, Parliament didn't cover itself in glory in this episode.
And they adopted overturned all of the findings of the Public Protector and adopted the Minister of Police's report instead. That's not holding to account, that's whitewashing.
They rubber-stamped a whitewashing, if I may call it that, of the excess. We would submit paints a picture which demonstrates what we would call a big picture of
judgment has been reserved. Aldrin St-Pierre, SABC News, Constitutional Court.
Meanwhile, preparations for the State of the Nation address are well underway. And with little over a day to go before the big event, all participants are being put through their paces.
It's the main event on the parliamentary calendar. Millions of rands goes into hosting it. And everyone taking part needs to stay in line. The roads around Parliament have already been affected as the dress rehearsals are in full swing. Inside the precinct, parliamentary workers and various contractors are busy with the final touches. Various media houses are setting up, laying cables and claiming their broadcasting space as their role in the day's proceedings remains very important. Parliament has reiterated the role of the media in SONA to keep citizens up to date with government's plans for them. The day of SONA itself will be filled with pomp and ceremony. With the state of the economy, the annual SONA dinner has been cancelled this year to save costs.
National salute! Present! Arms!
Whether or not MPs and guests are going to be showing off their finest threads remains to be seen as everyone tries to tighten their belts. But the public participation leg of the day, like the Civil Guard of Honour, remains a big part of the event. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
Meanwhile, the city of Cape Town has announced that road closures today, tomorrow and on Thursday from 5 o'clock in the afternoon for rehearsals of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address on Thursday. Extensive parking restrictions will also be in place in the central business district. The closures will have the greatest impact on road users travelling from the east side of the city towards Vredehuk and Gardens, as well as those travelling into town along the N2, Nelson Mandela Boulevard, the M3 and Duval Drive. Road closures including Spin, Parliament, Ruland and Plain Street will be taking place tomorrow afternoon, as well as tomorrow and Thursday. As back as today and then tomorrow. Now, the city says that My City commuters should note that due to the road closures on the day of SONA, routes 103 at Orange Zicht Gardens and route 107 at Camps Bay will be closed between 6 and 7 o'clock in the evening. However, commuters using the Golden Acre bus terminus will be unaffected. Company Gardens will be also closed entirely on Thursday from 9 a.m. to just before midnight. The search for the 3 remaining mine workers trapped underground at the Lily Gold Mine in Lowe's Creek near Barberton in Mpumalanga is continuing. The search has entered its 6th day today. Church leaders, the provincial government and community members have rallied behind families of the trapped workers to offer their support. Drones or remotely piloted aircraft have a wide variety of uses ranging from the military to commercial, and for creation and photographic purposes have also been used. According to the Lowveld Model Aircraft Club, drones are often used in places that is not safe for humans, like the past weekend when a drone was used to take pictures of the extent of the mine disaster at the Lily Mine. It was unsafe to use a helicopter, and so the mine management called in a drone to assess the damage. Now tomorrow, 50 years ago, on the 11th of February 1966, District 6 was declared a white group area. Over 60,000 people were relocated. A way of life for that community was destroyed. Now plans are in place for the next phase of the redevelopment of the area. 50 years later, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform now plans to build 108 residential apartments in the next phase of the redevelopment of District 6. That's a third of what was promised in 2014. More than 100 flats would be built, and it is envisaged that Phase 3 would be completed by the end of February next year. There are still more than 1,000 claims to be finalized. The development is nearly 2 years behind schedule, and claimants have been waiting for almost 2 decades for restitution, but the redevelopment has been beset by a number of delays.
It has not been an easy process. It's been an emotional process. It is a process that has been very, very complex. We are now entering the 3rd phase, as you say, which will see the construction of these new houses. But you see, we're not only building houses, there will also be business complexes in the place. And the theme really, and the gist of the matter is, we are returning people to where they were forcibly removed, and we want them to enjoy South Africa in its diversity. And so this is what we are about. The process is a complex one, but the desire and the will is there to do the right thing. As the Act indicates, people who are making claims have to be verified, and that's a very, very involved process, that particular process, because as we complete that process, when we reach the stage of settlement and finalization, we always want to make sure as a department that we're actually giving back places to their correct beneficiaries. And so that process of verification is a complex one. It is a process that I must say to you that we also regard that it has been very, very slow, and there are many factors to that. Sometimes claimants themselves, there's conflict among claimants, there's a trust, there's a reference group, and people of whatever nature, you know, to get involved in conflictual situations in this place. But the intention of the democratic government and our department in particular is to make sure that definitely the people of District 6 who are supposed to benefit do benefit.
Now, tomorrow we'll carry a special program on the forced removals of District 6 50 years ago. Very special program here on your favorite channel, Channel 404, your favorite program, Newsroom. So stay tuned. The World Food Programme says that humanitarian assistance to recent famine-affected areas in Zimbabwe will begin in March. Now, this follows Zimbabwe's declaration of a drought state of disaster last week. Zimbabwe has appealed for $1.5 billion to feed up to 3 million people facing hunger this season. The worst drought in recent memory has caused widespread hunger, second only to Malawi. 14 million people in southern Africa could go hungry this year. 2.4 million will be from Zimbabwe. Now that's more than 1 in 5 people. But being one of the last countries in the region to declare disaster could affect the amount of international assistance that the country will receive. The country's Vice President, Emerson Mnangagwa, said that the funds will be used for emergency food aid under 5 and school feeding programs, as well as emergency water supply, livestock and wildlife support. Catholics around the world are marking the beginning of Lent season by observing Ash Wednesday. This is the day that Catholics are reminded of mortality and hear the phrase "from dust you come and to dust you shall return," as ashes are smudged onto their foreheads. The season of Lent calls on Catholics to fast, pray and give alms to the needy. Traditionally, the ash used to mark people's foreheads on Ash Wednesday is from burnt palms from the previous year's Palm Sunday celebrations. It is blessed with holy water and scented by incense. It occurs 46 days before Easter and can fall as early as February the 4th or as late as March the 10th. Further afield now, Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Bernie Sanders have shaken up the U.S. presidential race with decisive victories in the New Hampshire primary for their respective parties. Billionaire Trump now seems likely to far outstrip the next Republican candidate at the party's convention. Sanders beat the Democratic rival Hillary Clinton by a large margin in New Hampshire after losing narrowly to her in Iowa.
The results, though decisive, did little to clear up confusion about who would emerge as an establishment contender to Trump on the Republican side. Trump's win solidifies his front-runner status in the race to be the party's White House nominee for the November 8th election. The former reality television star has campaigned to deport illegal immigrants and temporarily ban Muslims from entering the U.S.
I'll tell you what do we really want to thank, right? We want to thank the people of New Hampshire, right? Do we love the people of New Hampshire? You know, I said it, and I said it even a year ago. I said, I think I'm going to do really well there because I'm here a lot, and it's so beautiful, and I love it so much, and I love the people, and I said, I actually think they like me a lot.
Sanders, who describes himself as a democratic socialist, has called for eradicating income inequality, breaking up big banks, and providing free college tuition. He had 59% of the vote based off about 32% of the vote, ahead of former Secretary of State Clinton, who had 39%.
Shortly after the polls closed, Secretary Clinton called and was very gracious in her congratulations. I thank her for her call, and I congratulate her and her supporters for the vigorous campaign they ran in New Hampshire. Together, we have sent the message that will echo from Wall Street to Washington, from Maine to California. And that is that the government of our great country belongs to all of the people and not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors and their super PACs.
The next primary races are in Nevada and South Carolina this month.
Now, today's complex cross-border challenges surpass the capacity of any single country or institution to handle by itself. Now, that's according to the UN Secretary General when he presented his new Agenda for Humanity. It comes ahead of the first ever United Nations World Humanitarian Summit that's set for May this year.
From food insecurity in large parts of Africa due to changing weather patterns and conflicts, to mass migration from war-ravaged countries like Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan, where terrorism adds to persistent instability, the Secretary-General told member states what they already knew. That need is at record levels, but the political solutions to relieve them remain elusive.
Here hoping to mobilize the world community to this growing humanitarian imperative.
We need to restore trust in our global world order and in the capacities of our national and regional institutions to confront these challenges effectively. We need to show the millions of people living in conflict with the chronic needs and constant fear, the solidarity that they deserve and expect.
He laid out a plan to achieve this new agenda, calling on leaders to assume responsibility in preventing or ending conflicts, urging states to uphold norms of human rights, ensuring that no one is left behind, while moving people from requiring aid to ending that need and reliance.
We must also invest in smarter ways of financing and mobilizing resources. This will require diversifying and expanding our resource base and using a wide variety of financing tools. I have proposed that we establish a new international financing platform with the World Bank so we can explore new mechanisms to more predictably and adequately finance collective outcomes in protracted crises and fragile context.
Calling for the World Humanitarian Summit in Turkey later this year to be a turning point where humanity is a driver of global decision-making. Sherman Briceby's SABC News, New York.
Well, that's your news for now. We'll be back right after this, after the break, with Kendall Makamate and your sports news.
The son of Africa, Trevor Noah, is leaving America in stitches.
I never dreamed that I would one day have, well, two things really. An indoor toilet and a job as host of The Daily Show.
We are the first to bring you the latest films around the globe.
Dear white people, the minimum requirement of black friends needed to not seem racist has just been raised to 2.
Cobbins Asako is a gifted blind musician, a master of soothing notes from the piano.
I love to sit behind the piano. You know, that also helps me find inspiration.
Join Refulo Mulwa every Friday for that 1-hour weekly dose of art and entertainment news at 9 p.m. on Trends.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Good morning, welcome back. My name is Kendall Makamate, and our top story in this sports bulletin is South African cricket captain A.B. de Villiers has credited an all-round solid performance by his players and a positive attitude for their record-breaking 7-wicket win over England in Centurion on Tuesday. The Proteas became the first team to successfully chase down a target of more than 300 runs in a one-day international at SuperSport Park. England now lead the 5-match ODI series 2-1.
After winning the toss and electing to bat first, England looked comfortable as the likes of Joe Root and Alex Hales kept the scoreboard ticking over. Hales eventually made 65 before becoming one of Kagiso Rabada's 2 victims. Root hit 125 off 113 balls before being run out in the 43rd over. Ben Stokes contributed 53 runs. And after 50 overs, the tourists had an impressive 318 for 8 on the board. The Proteas, however, were up for the challenge. Openers Quinton de Kock and Hashim Amla put on 239 runs for the first wicket, before de Kock had to return to the pavilion following a fine knock of 135 off 117 deliveries. His innings included 16 fours and 4 sixes. Amla himself was in splendid form as he added 127 runs. Faf du Plessis finished unbeaten on a quick-fire 33 and hit the winning runs in the 47th over to record the historic win.
I always proud myself to be one of those captains who really push the guys in the field and always ask for good attitudes, and we had that today. There's no doubt about that. So that tells a story about where our team's at. Even though we haven't had the greatest series up till date, the attitudes were still in a really good place.
We knew it was going to be a better wicket at night here. Just a matter of getting in and just batting normally. Value for runs here, just have to beat the infield, so that's just the plan of action.
South Africa have an opportunity to square the series at the Wanderers in Johannesburg on Friday. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Now, former Proteas player and World Cup winning coach with India, Gary Kirsten, aims to bring tangible change to the equation that leaves township schools devoid of any facilities to allow young aspirant cricketers in the township to reach the heights scaled by the Makayantinis, the Bavumas, the Rabadas of this world by providing nets, equipment and coaches to as many schools as possible in Khayelitsha. Earlier this morning, he was in our Cape Town studios and we had a chat. I started first by asking him about the source of his inspiration.
About 18 months ago, I got the opportunity to meet up with a very inspirational man in Khayelitsha at the Chris Hani School. And our kind of meeting was by chance in many ways. And I asked him just to take me on a tour around the eastern side of Khayelitsha, just to kind of see what's happening from a cricketing perspective in some of those township schools. And, you know, I was surprised to see that there wasn't much infrastructure in those schools. And I guess very tough for young guys who have a desire to play the game to really even begin to do something. So I think from that departure point, I was very keen to help out in whatever capacity I could, just to begin to build some infrastructure, even if it was a couple of nets, which is what we've done, just to get cricket going. So what we have done in a few of the schools already, and you know, every time we raise a little bit more money, we go to another school, we just install a few nets there, place a coach, and give them some cricket equipment, and hopefully, you know, create some interest in that particular school.
Now, what's unique about this particular program? Because there have always been programs in development in soccer, development in rugby, cricket, and so on. What's unique about your program?
I'm not sure, to be honest. You know, I think the one thing for me is that that I've noticed, having done quite a lot of work in the townships of late, is that I think it'd be really nice to develop some sort of ecosystem within the townships themselves. And, you know, I think there's a lot of talent out there that goes unpassed and kind of no one sees it. And we pick out the really good ones, and then we tend to, you know, take them to some of the mainstream schools. But it would be really exciting for me to develop a school within the township that becomes a recognized cricket school. And if I can, in a very small way, add some value there and maybe just kind of focus on a few schools that we can really develop the cricket, then we build a cricketing ecosystem within the townships themselves, which I would be excited by.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and actually does go a long way towards actually creating the kind of tangible feel that we want to develop in this country. Tell us why you chose Chris Hani and Spamandla in Khayelitsha. Why these specific schools?
No specific reason other than I was able to, by chance, meet the principal of Chris Hani, and you know, he's done a fantastic job. Arrived there in 2010 with a matric pass rate of about 42%, and in 5 years it's already up into the high 80s. So I was inspired by him as a leader, and my obvious passion, because I'm in the coaching space on leadership, just I guess I warmed to him, and just to see the fantastic work he was doing. So I wanted to know in any way how I could help. And, you know, I guess from that moment on, you know, we formed a very close relationship, and I've done everything in my capacity to try and create something very exciting for cricket in that region. And again, you know, for me, it's just in a very small way, how can I help, I guess, Cricket South Africa just to really make those programs work in those areas.
Gary, just recently, well, last night we had a fantastic knock by Hashim Amla and the young Quentin de Kock, but prior to that, we had some serious pastings for the under-19 side out in Bangladesh. I mean, they were beaten by Bangladesh, beaten by Namibia, beaten by Zimbabwe, sides that we hardly ever expect to lose to. What do you think is going on in the under-19 side? You
know, difficult to say. I'm very much on the outside of that, but you You know, one thing I will tell you is that I work a lot with teenage cricketers now in my my own academy. I've got 5 or 6 coaches that work with me, and they do a lot of work at that under 18 and under 19 level. And they tell me, and as much as I've seen, there's some real talent coming through our mainstream cricket schools in this country. So I guess the results were surprising in many ways, knowing the talent we've got. But I think really it really is a good example of, you know, of kind of leadership in any environment, in any team. You know, if you feel that the leadership is strong and that they can really move people and inspire people to greater performances, then, you know, then we can achieve anything. So for me, I'm not worried about the talent. I think there's plenty of it. Yeah. It's how we nurture it, manage it, and develop it to kind of greater levels.
And I suppose this is part of where your program fits in as well with that. Now, on a slightly different note, in your career, you spent quite a lot of time in India, right? And what kind of pressures did you notice around you that players were coming under from bookies and the like to fix matches?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's well controlled at the moment. I think the ICC anti-corruption program is an incredibly good one. And they've stopped a lot of the issues that have existed in the world of late. I think they've got a very rigorous and organised program. We probably don't hear of the many incidences where they've been able to stop something happening before it goes through. So I feel very confident in that space, but I don't think it'll ever take away the individual that's looking to target potentially a young individual who kind of looks at this and sees it as a potential to make very quick money. And I think we know in life that there's no such thing. So, you know, we'd always try and advise young players just to be careful of them, but they are around, and I don't think these guys will ever go away.
Right. Now, do you think enough of the right things are being done? For example, like maybe even adding the possibility of jail sentences and so on? Because right now it's mostly fines and bannings and stuff. Do you think enough of the right things are being put in place to eradicate it?
Listen, I think players are well aware, and they certainly are being educated into the risks and the dangers of it. But I guess you can look at any of the evils that we have in the world and how we can be tempted by them, you know, and many of them are things that we know are not the right thing to sign up for, to agree to do. But you know, as flawed human beings that we are, we sometimes get tempted into these things. So it's something that's out there. The players are well educated on it, and you know, you can only hope that a player understands the consequences of making a decision like that, knowing that it's illegal and it's quick money.
There you go. Very interesting chat we had with the legend himself. Now, moving on to our other top story for this morning. Kaizer Chiefs have jumped into 3rd place on the Premiership log, ahead of Black Aces after a narrow 1-0 win over Bidvest Wits. Wits' coach Gavin Hunt called the result embarrassing after the hosts dominated large stanzas of the game, while Kompela said there's no space for comments in the results table.
Kaizer Chiefs struggled to find their rhythm in the first half, which resulted in them having no shots on target. On the other hand, the home side had a good start and almost opened the score in the 12th minute. Ben Motswari came close from a corner, but his effort hit the wrong side of the post. Spiwe Shabalala's free kick from outside the box failed to trouble the keeper. Bidvest piled up the pressure on Chiefs through Mahlambi, but still failed to find the back of the net.
Mahlambi, still Mahlambi!
Chiefs slowly found their rhythm in the second half, and George Maluleke put them ahead from a free kick.
Yes, it will, and it's a great goal. It really is. Lack of concentration in the ball for Bidvest, Maluleke.
Peterson made crucial saves to keep Chiefs in the match. First, he tipped a 24-yard free kick over the post, and later, he denied James Keane from close range.
James Keane! Peterson with a great save. Coutinho does the tidying up.
In the end, Chiefs grabbed all maximum points.
There you go. That's where we leave it for this sports bulletin. We'll be back with more news and analysis with Evan Janssen after this break.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, the public protector, Thuli Madonsela, says she's leaving it to the Treasury to look into the amount that President Jacob Zuma must pay back for non-security upgrades to his private home at Nkandla. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment, of course, in its hearing on Nkandla and the powers of the public protector. Now, last night, it was late. Last night, our contributing editor, William Voko, spoke to constitutional law expert Khomotso Moshikaro from the University of Cape Town. He started by asking him whether he was surprised by how President Jacob Zuma's lawyers accepted the decision.
There had been a similar case that the DA had instituted in court against the SABC. And in that case, there are two separate judgments that have very, very different views about exactly what the powers of the public protector are. There is the Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, which basically avers the position that the EFF lawyers took. But then again, there is the High Court judgment. And the High Court actually took a view that really could have been in support of the president, arguably, if one interpreted that judgment very broadly. So it was rather surprising that they actually effectively conceded the absolute binding effect of the public protector's report.
From where you sit, I mean, someone like me who's a layman, I would have thought that even though they would concede at the end of the day, I would have thought that they would have at least flagged some critical issues. Were there simply no issues, or did they just think, let's forget about it?
I mean, it may have been a matter of strategy. So you're reading the bench and you know your audience, and perhaps they just think that it wasn't worth the time to waste on that, and rather maybe they can get concessions elsewhere. But really, there are actual reasons to be concerned about overbroad powers being given to the public protector. I mean, our constitutional scheme really does envisage what we would call a separation of powers. And that's not just a principle that applies to the president and to courts and the legislature, but also to Chapter 9 institutions. We need their powers to be carefully circumscribed whilst still being effective. And the kind of argument brought forward by both the EFF lawyers and the DA's lawyers call for a very radical interpretation of what the public protector's powers are. And we all have to remember that ultimately institutions outlive their current occupants. So what happens when someone of less ethical or moral fiber than Thuli Madonsela occupies the office of the public protector? Remember, her term as public protector is soon coming to an end, and it's non-renewable. What then? Who chooses the public protector? It's obviously the National Assembly, the ANC-led government. So we need to be careful when we give overbroad powers to a particular personality just simply because of their moral standing. We actually have to think beyond the facts of this case. And it calls for a lot of concern that there wasn't much discussion about that point in the court today.
But why should that be an issue if one takes into account, I mean, why do we have a public protector in the first instance? Is it not because we have to protect the most vulnerable in society? So why should the focus be on curtailing their powers instead of giving them more, for argument's sake?
Well, this is also because judgments also outlive the current court as well. So we can't all just simply rely on the fact that the public protector is designed to protect the interests of the very, very vulnerable. The real question is about how far she can go in protecting that vulnerable group. No one before the court today was in any way disputing the fact that the public protector's powers have to be effective, to use the words of the EFF's lawyer, Mr. Trengrove. However, the question of how effective is still up for debate. The constitutional text is not very clear about that. It only calls for appropriate remedial action. And even before it gets to that, it specifically says that Parliament may regulate the powers of the public protector. So all of this is still very ambiguous, and the only way we can go about trying to figure out what it means is that we actually have to consider all the interests at work here, the interests that work in favor of the public protector and for a broader reading of her powers, but also the interests that actually call for a rather more moderate interpretation of her powers. We can't always just jump the gun, as it were, and just simply decide the facts in favor of the position we already hold. The Constitution itself must guide us first.
Now, Southern Africa is experiencing the worst drought in more than 30 years, which has been attributed to climate change. Buildings are responsible for a large share of energy-related carbon emissions that are contributing towards climate fluctuations. The construction industry is also responsible for other damaging impacts to our environment due to the materials used in their processes. But tackling this issue in the construction industry has proved to be a challenge. However, going green when building homes and businesses could have a lasting effect on our environment. I'm joined in studio now by the commercial manager at Rahau, Mr. Tony O'Neill. Very good morning to you, Tony. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Why are we seeing this green thinking only now in the construction industry? Aren't we a little bit behind the game?
Well, I think it's been there a while, but as always, things are dominated by finance, and it's been in Europe a long time, and I think now we're starting to get to grips with it here.
Talking about that, just give us a quick overview where we are. We see these kinds of images appear in and over South Africa, and we see new materials being used in the industry. How do you quantify whether a building is green?
Okay, well, it's got to have a sustainable product. It's got to have a product that reduces energy, both in heat loss from the building and in heat gain from outside, without using mechanical devices.
Yeah. And what kind of materials should be used in these processes to give you that the green outcome that we all want these days?
Okay, well, again, it needs to be an energy-efficient material, a material that doesn't conduct. So a material like the one we use, which is UPVC, which doesn't let the heat in and doesn't let the cold out. So you need a high-performing, energy-efficient window material.
How do we balance cost and need in this space? Because surely these kinds of materials will cost a little bit more, one would think.
They do, but I think we need to look more long-term than how much that's costing for that exact project at that time. We need to look over a longer period of time. These products are going to be installed for 30, 35 years. So I think if you look at the payback and if you look at the amount of time they're in for and their benefits, it evens out.
The next 20 years for construction in South Africa, if you had a magic picture that you could paint us, what will our buildings start to look like then in 20 years' time?
Well, I don't think the buildings need to look drastically different. Some of the materials used can look exactly like they are now. What has to happen is regulation has to drive the industry, because the industry often, wherever you are, won't do it on its own back. So with regulation and with controlled regulation as well, we can get there.
What about things like skills within the construction industry? I'm sure that when we're talking about New World construction and materials used and the like, there's a shortage of these kind of skill sets in Southern Africa. How do we overcome that?
There is. And here at Rahau, we open academies. For us, training is a cornerstone of our development. If you can't train the people to understand and work within the industry professionally, then the industry doesn't move forward. So for us, it's very important.
Now tell us a little bit more about the Rahau Academy, Windows Academy it's called, I think. Do you think that this could be a kind of example for other institutions to follow suit?
I think a lot of the high-end institutions are already running academies, and I think it's a way to benefit local employment, local education, and it's something that we're committed to.
Is there enough of a will at the moment within the construction sector or industry here in South Africa to make this shift?
Not yet, but I think it's coming. I think with the right legislation and the right public backing, I think we can move forward and get there.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for joining us. That is Mr. Tony O'Neill,
Thank you.
Tony O'Neill is the commercial manager at Rayo, and we're talking about where we are with regards to green construction here in Southern Africa, for the simple reason buildings can be some of the worst emitters of carbon on the planet, and we have to change the way we construct our buildings. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you. No problem.
Now, of course, back to our question of the day today. Of course, we deal with rhino farming. Earlier, we spoke about rhino farming, and those for and against gave their views on this matter. Just to recap, of course, the 26th of November last year, the courts lifted the ban on the domestic trade in rhino horn in South Africa. That was implemented by government in 2009. Two of South Africa's largest private rhino breeders, John Hume and Johan Kruger, have been fighting a legal battle to overturn this moratorium, saying that it is their constitutional right to sell rhino horn. Now, we've had lots of different views on it, but let's go back and take a look at John Hume's own account.
Rhino, but especially white rhino, are the most wonderful animals you'll ever meet in your life. I think it always was controversial from a point of view of because you dehorn rhino. I dehorned rhino first of all to save my rhinos' lives. I had the first rhino poached in Mpumalanga in 2006, and we immediately dehorned all the rhino. And then for 2 or 3 years we had no poaching. Then it crept in again, and I think the problem there was that people began to realize when you dehorn a rhino, it's rather like your nail. You cut off the dead part, but the live part is still there. I saw a woman, I think she was, I forget which animal rights movement she was, on TV saying to dehorn rhinos is wrong. And up came a picture of a rhino with half its face hacked off. So, I mean, that was a blatant lie. I'm a full-time veterinarian. I have 4 managers, 3 admin ladies, a fully qualified vet nurse running our hand rear section. Security costs in the last few months have gone from 600,000 Rand a month to 3 million Rand a month. And I can't see that going down, quite frankly. I don't sell any rhino because my life's ambition is to breed 200 rhino a year. One of the problems that our policies have landed us with, and that is that a rhino is worth more dead than alive. Because what I'm doing here is simply not sustainable. If I sold all of my progeny every single year, I would come nowhere near paying the running costs. I will fail. Every single policy is against me and, unfortunately, against the rhino. Why can you share a sheep and sell the wool and not take a rhino's horns off and sell the horn and keep the rhino? If I'm able to sell my sustainable product, I will keep the poachers away. If I can't, I will fail to keep them away. So who to my project is worse than the poacher? The person who's keeping my money away to pay for my project. And that person is the anti-legal trader. The anti-legal trader because he does not want me to trade my horn legally. So therefore, if he's an anti-legal trader, by implication, surely he must be a pro-illegal trader. Because if he's anti-legal, he must be pro-illegal. And therefore, he's not only on the side of the poacher, but he's keeping the money away from me to protect my rhino. So he, therefore, must be worse than the poacher for my product. And my project will be killed by him more than the poacher. So the anti-legal trader is more of an enemy to my rhinos than the actual poacher.
Yeah, thanks to the guys at Naturecast, Michael Sparks and his team for making that interview available to us. It's been a very interesting discussion point. We want your view also. Can rhino farming save the rhino? That's a very interesting question, I think. I got my own views on it, but we'd like to hear what you think. Send it to us a little bit later in the show. We'll put some of the best ones up, and we'll talk around it. It's a very interesting concept. But news on the go. Let's see what's on our Facebook page here this morning. As you can see, of course, Burundi's economy should expand by 3.5% in 2016. The Finance Ministry said this yesterday after contracting sharply in 2015 amid political turmoil and daily violence over President Pierre Nkurunziza's re-election there. Then the World Food Programme says humanitarian assistance to recent famine-affected areas in Zimbabwe will begin in March of this year. Then the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse has warned that threatening SMS demands for outstanding e-tolls may be illegal because the call centre sending them may be falsely claiming to be the South African National Roads Agency. Interesting story that. It's one that's not going to go away here in South Africa, and we'll keep abreast of developments there. That's what's on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also go to our website, sabc.co.za/news. And you get all the latest updates all the time. Let's take a quick look now at the front pages from around the African continent this morning. We'll start with the Daily Trust in Nigeria, and it reports that the National Assembly has said the February 25 deadline is set to pass the 2016 budget is no longer feasible due to some errors and other problems that have been discovered in the draft budget. Yes, financial difficulties facing Nigeria because of commodity prices plummeting. Then, moving to Swaziland, the Observer there says in response to the Central Bank of Swaziland's interest rates increase by 0.5 percentage points from 5.75 to 6.25, local banks have already started raising prime lending rates there. Then in Zambia, the Post reports that President Edgar Lungu has asked Zambians who do not have grade 12 certificates and wish to participate in politics to go to night school. Go to night school, he says, especially if you want to be part of the political process in Zambia. Interesting one. I wonder what our South African counterparts would think about that. Anyhow, time for us now to take a look at what the weather has in store back at the top of the hour with another news update. Don't go away.
I'm Peter Ngo. And I'm Vavakini Chetty-Miller, SAB Miller, Anheuser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall
is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned.
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened.
I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't. Who are you asking? You're looking at me.
Yes, Zubaydah, I'm talking to you.
So the old fuddy-duddies like Dennis and me will remain there.
I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about... damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
So much more than just the Legal and Rights show. Join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to Business Review. I'm Frances Hurd.
Join us as we unpack each day's top business stories and tell you what matters without the jargon.
The general tone of this is interventionist. It's quite sort of, I don't know, pie in the sky really in some degree.
We look at where South Africa's investment opportunities lie.
Our relationship with China is based on mutual respect.
And bring you top newsmakers and analysts.
This is not the World Bank. World Bank places conditionalities.
I've learned not to expect anything from the regulator in terms of moving faster on licensing.
We will definitely see inflation increase. I think we will peak very close to 7% during the first quarter of next year.
That's Business Review with Frances Hurd, weekdays at 6 p.m. on the SABC News channel.
Here is 30-year-old Bongani Mbambo, popularly known as DJ Phobia. He is a blind DJ, but still has an inspiring vision.
It was difficult for me, growing up, because I had eye cancer at the age of 3 months. Yeah, that's how I became blind. And then as I grew up, the other kids used to treat me differently. They used to tease me about my blindness, That never stopped me from doing what I want to do.
A good support structure has made Bongani the man he is today.
My friends stood by me, and they even taught me how to ride a bicycle. I could ride a bicycle. They say, no, you can do what we can do. Being blind, it doesn't bother me at all. That's why I say I don't wish to see. Yeah. So, I believe that God is with me, in everything I do, and I pray that He helps me to be the best that I can be. This is my phone, ne? It comes with the speaking software already installed on it. When I type, I just type the number 2, then there's 1. Then there's 5, then it speaks everything that I do.
He met the well-known DJ Christos, who taught the young man how to turn tables.
In 2005, he called me and invited me to the very first South African music conference. Yeah, then I stayed at his house for 2 weeks, and then he taught me how to play. The first day I got there, and it took me only an hour to master the turntables.
And from then on, he never looked back. He has been working very hard to get his name known.
I've played alongside the following DJs like Black Coffee, Christos, Oskido, Fresh, Maestro, Glenn Lewis, Tira, everyone basically, and then even the Ralph Gum, Rocco. The only guy that I wish to play alongside is Louis Vega.
Now we get to see Bongani, the DJ Phobia.
Sometimes when I play, I just feel like, hey, yeah, the crowd is giving me the energy. Yeah. I'd like to say Like, never give up on what you want to do. Like, never feel sorry for yourself. Like, if you're disabled or anything, or someone is teasing you, or like, never let that bring you down. Never let anyone bring you down or try to stop you from doing what you want to do.
You're not just blind in the physical, but in Zotital, blinding ngempela kule nto yenzayo. You're a pro.
It's exactly 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Wednesday, the 10th of February 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, channel 404. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston, and I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. And you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Now, we're asking you a very important question today, and we're asking you, can rhino farming save the rhino? That's our theme for the day, so let's find out from you what you have to say on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. Judgment has been reserved in the constitutional hearing on the powers of the public protector. Preparations ahead of President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address tomorrow evening are well underway. And the United States, Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Bernie Sanders score victories in the New Hampshire primary for their respective parties in the U.S. presidential race. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the sports news. Very good morning.
Good morning, Elvis. Quite a lot happening in the world of cricket as well as the world of football. A lot of people have been quite ecstatic about the Proteas' victory from last night, but I get ahead of myself. Good morning to you. This is what we have for you in the sports.
For the first time this season for the Amakosi Kaizer Chiefs.
Kaizer Chiefs remind log leaders of their presence as Steve Kompella leads them to victory over Piet Wits.
Quinton de Kock, you beauty.
Quinton de Kock and Hashim Amla power the Proteas to a record run chase at Centurion to keep South Africa in the hunt for a series win.
Well, that's quite a shot there to seal it for Sri Lanka. Well played.
A new look Sri Lanka sounds a warning ahead of the World Cup, beating India by 5 wickets in Pune. And that's what we've got for you in the sports. Be sure to stick around for that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. Top story this hour. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment in the Nkandla Report case. Now, this after robust legal arguments from lawyers representing all the interested parties, which included the DA, the EFF, the National Assembly Speaker, the Police Minister, and President Zuma.
We accept it's not just a recommendation. She wanted certain things done, and the undertaking is that those things should be done.
And several other concessions followed, including that the Constitutional Court may have jurisdiction to hear the matter. Another concession, only a court can review the Public Protector's findings and not a police ministry's report.
We, as you would have seen, place no reliance on that. There is a sense in which it is res inter alios acta for present circumstances.
The President's legal team now contradicting what he said in a letter to the Public Protector, as quoted here by her counsel.
I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that reports of the Public Protector, and he quotes the Public Protector, are by law not subject to any review or second guessing by a minister and or cabinet.
From then on, it was all too easy for the applicants, but not for the police minister. His lawyer had some explaining to do. How were all the upgrades security related? Why was the president not liable to pay back any money?
The minister's hands actually were tied. He has to make sure that as part of an executive, he has to perform a duty given to him by the National Assembly, and he will only be wrong if he does that duty not in accordance with the instruction.
And then came another concession, this time from the National Assembly.
There is no gainsaying, Chief Justice, that Parliament acted on a wrong principle, thinking at the time that the principle was correct.
From where the main litigants sit, Parliament didn't cover itself in glory in this episode.
And they adopted overturned all of the findings of the public protector and adopted the Minister of Police's report instead. That's not holding to account, that's whitewashing.
They rubber-stamped a whitewashing, if I may call it that, of the excess. We would submit paints a picture which demonstrates what we would call a big picture of advance.
Judgment has been reserved. Aldrin St-Pierre, SABC News, Constitutional Court.
Meanwhile, preparations for the State of the Nation's address are well underway. Now, with little over a day to go before the big event, all participants are being put through their paces.
It's the main event on the parliamentary calendar. Millions of rands goes into hosting it. And everyone taking part needs to stay in line. The roads around Parliament have already been affected as the dress rehearsals are in full swing. Inside the precinct, parliamentary workers and various contractors are busy with the final touches. Various media houses are setting up, laying cables and claiming their broadcasting space as their role in the day's proceedings remains very important. Parliament has reiterated the role of the media in SONA to keep citizens up to date with government's plans for them. The day of SONA itself will be filled with pomp and ceremony. With the state of the economy, the annual SONA dinner has been cancelled this year to save costs.
National salute! Present! Arms!
Whether or not MPs and guests are going to be showing off their finest threads remains to be seen as everyone tries to tighten their belts. But the public participation leg of the day, like the Civil Guard of Honor, remains a big part of the event. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
African mining houses need to push the innovation envelope if they want to succeed in a sector that's characterized by plunging commodity prices and other challenges. Now, this is all contained in a recent report by Deloitte. The report says that innovation is needed for a sustainable mining sector. That report was released by the Mining Indaba that's currently underway in Cape Town. The annual Indaba on investing in African mining brings together investors, mining professionals and government leaders to interact and seek new partnerships. Diabo Sito is standing by in Cape Town. A very good morning to you, Diabo. And can you tell us a little bit more about this report, because we believe you do have a guest there as well to expand.
Absolutely. Good morning, Elvis. Yes, we are in Cape Town, and yesterday, or rather maybe in the early mornings of today, Deloitte released a report on the state of innovation in the mining sector. You'll appreciate that this conference has a lot to do, obviously, with mining, and this report, it looks at to what extent that mining companies are actually innovating and making new technologies in the sector. But I have a guest with me here, Andrew Lane, who's the Africa mining leader at Deloitte, who's going to give us a little bit more of information on what the report contains and what it suggests and what gaps it has identified. Andrew Lane, thank you very much for your time. Give us a few views on the salient points in which this report has made with regards to innovation.
So we did this report, we're presenting it today. It's the second in a three-part series. We did the first one in Canada, and this is our Africa report. You know, the mining industry is in a difficult space right now. Times are tough, mines are getting deeper, commodity prices aren't where we are, or where we'd like them to be. And there's a real realization that innovation is required. You know, incremental improvement is no longer good enough. And I think one of the key outcomes of the report is, coming up with ideas is the easy part of innovation, but actually making them stick and turning them into results is a whole lot more difficult. And while we find it is definitely on the agenda and clients take it very seriously, in fact it's more on the agenda than it was a year ago, we're still struggling to get results. And it's largely due to governance systems and ability to collaborate and metrics and incentives to actually drive innovative behavior in an organization.
Many companies speak of mechanization in the sector. However, of course, it's not quite a fine balance when it comes to jobs in the sector and mechanization. Do you perhaps look at that in the report?
We do indeed, and indeed there is an imperative to modernize, I think particularly in some of the deeper hard rock mines, and obviously that's going to have social consequences. And I think it raises the complication of, first of all, where do you get the skills from, because the skills mix is going to be different. But also, how do you deal with the socio-economic fallout? The requirements for a social dividend from the industry aren't changing. So I think it's going to require a real innovation from a social point of view, and also from the way in which we engage with our social partners.
Let's paint a future scenario. Let's say the mines today were very innovative. They had very advanced technological equipment to mine. What would mining look like today?
Well, in that scenario, which I think is where the industry has to go, I think that the real prize is that the industry lasts for a lot longer. The situation right now is many of our ore reserves are getting to the point where they can't be economically and safely mined with current methodologies.
When we look at the South African context, I spoke earlier on about the balance between jobs and mechanization. What is the picture that you find in other parts of the continent with regards to balancing of jobs and mechanization?
I think it's pretty much the same. I think the job situation is potentially a bit more acute in this country, given where we are and some of the sort of difficult relationships we have in the industry between stakeholders. So I think we have that trade-off is more important for us than it is elsewhere in the continent. But everyone's facing the same issue.
Let's talk about these issues, particularly the commodity slump and other challenges that the mining sector faces. What do you, as Deloitte, make of that?
Well, times are tough, and everyone we speak to is really, really focusing on taking costs out, managing for cash, and just surviving.
And speaking of survival as well, when we look at this commodity slump, do you envisage that more companies will survive this type of turmoil, or are we going to perhaps maybe, in your view, see more companies closing their doors?
Well, I think the reality is, when you're in commodity markets that are oversupplied, which is the case with a lot of our commodities, the reality is that some capacity has to come out of the market to equalize the supply and demand balance. So that will inevitably end in organisation either closing operations, scaling back operations, or potentially some players even going to the wall.
Andrew Lane, thank you very much for your time. You've been a really good help. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elvis, that was Andrew Lane. He's the Africa mining analyst. Unfortunately, he's had to rush to a presentation. But I'd like to give you some of the salient things that happened from Monday when we got here and what we got yesterday. On Monday, the Minister of Mines, Msebenzi Zwane, had sought to make sure that he gives assurance to the mining sector in telling them that the policy uncertainty issue that they've been complaining about, particularly the Chamber of Mines and others that are not affiliated to the Chamber, that those will be sorted out. What stood out for me yesterday was the issue of AMCU. It had its own press briefing. It's the first time that this union had come to the mining indaba, and they saying that they are not faced with the issue that there's a mining indaba that does not benefit workers. Of course, we know that unions, they are for the workers. All they're saying is that the executives that are here should not be concentrating on making sure that they make more money. However, they should speak to how they can make people's lives better, miners' lives better. And then, of course, there was the issue of safety, pegging that to the issue of the Lily mine that's currently where we see 3 miners who are still stuck at Lily mine in Mpumalanga. There's the issue of safety. AMCU saying, look, we want companies to make sure that they put more effort into safety measures. They believe that companies are not doing enough. companies, on the other hand, they say, look, we will strengthen the capacity that we have to make sure that workers are safe, workers work in a proper environment. There are a couple of statistics from 2015 that say that mining fatalities dropped in 2015 compared to 2014. In 2015, I believe there were only 77 fatalities compared to 84 in 2014. However, injuries had gone up by around 15%. So those are the most topical issues at the mining indaba, Elvis, and we will be bringing you more updates throughout the bulletins on Channel 44 and across all the SABC channels.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that report. That's our reporter at the mining indaba, Diaba Sito, chatting to us there. Well, we'll be taking a break, and we'll be right back with your regional news just after that.
In Africa, technology has created many new ways of doing things.
ICT is an increasingly important part of everybody's life.
It's being used in education, for social media, and now for farming too.
The best thing about internet for a farmer is that we get to share information.
On Network, we give you all the important African technology and social media news. That's Network with me, Phumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon, only on the SABC News channel.
Hello again. Time for us now to take a more regional approach to our news here on SABC Newsroom. Don't forget our question of the day. We asked, can rhino farming save the rhino? Some people can't seem to make the difference between a rhino farming and then, well, what they call the legal trade in rhino. But what is your views on it? We'd like to hear what you say. Anyhow, in our regional focus, the ANC in the Northern Cape, oh, they'll be hosting a 2-day Lekgotla. Well, it's just about to come to an end in Kimberley. The provincial Lekgotla was sitting to take stock of progress made in implementing the party's program of action in line with the 2014 manifesto and the January 8th statement. The Lekgotla will also provide the basis for the provincial government's program of action that will influence the State of the Province address, the State of the Municipality address, which is also known as the SOMA, and the departmental budget speeches and other issues like job creation, security, and the threat of electricity cut-offs to several municipalities in the province. Now, the ANC Northern Cape Provincial Secretary, Zamani Saul, joins us in our studio in Kimberley this morning to take a look at all the issues. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Eben, and morning to the viewers.
Now, you are just about to conclude your Lekgotla. It's been indicated that this, the second transition, will place more emphasis on radical economic transformation in government. What is the envisioned impact that this will have on ordinary members of the public and society at large?
Now, the Lekgotla that we started yesterday has basically identified two critical areas that the ANC in the Northern Cape should focus on. One of the areas is the increasing unemployment rate in the province, and as well as improving the quality of education. And there's a basket of strategies that the ANC has worked on in order to ensure that we really reverse the increasing unemployment rate in the province. We create more job opportunities for our people to have opportunities of work and training.
You mentioned unemployment. It's a problem in the province. It's a problem in the rest of the country. The mining sector plays a major role in the Northern Cape with regards to jobs. It's anticipated that there will be job losses coming in the mining sector in the next term or so. How do you remedy that situation as government?
No, our expectations and with the discussions that we had with the mining houses in the province, it's quite clear that there is plus minus 8,000 jobs that will be lost this year. And as the African National Congress, we are very much discontent with the fact that always when there is economic downturn, workers becomes the first casualties. South Africa is it's a capitalist economy. And naturally, capitalist economies goes through booms and bust. And our little expectations is that mining executives must, whatever they do, they must work in anticipation that there will be times when there will be economic downturn, and they should come up with appropriate measures to cushion and protect the workers. But be it as it may, what we worked on yesterday and what we've established is that in the province for this year, there will be more than 1,000 economic and social infrastructure projects that will be implemented with a worth of 2.2 billion rand and the capacity to take on board about more than 30,000 workers. So what we are working on is to strengthen the infrastructure programs that we have in the province and accelerate the implementation of those projects. And we firmly believe that in itself might inject a positive spirit into the economy in the province, which might be able to shelter the poor.
You talk about the projects that's on the horizon, which is very important, but the acting chairperson there, Kenny Moimang, he's emphasized that the capacity of the state to deal with this is key in transformation of government. Now, with that as the context, does this mean the end of cadre deployment in the Northern Cape government?
Cadre deployment does not equal deployment of comrades who don't have the relevant qualification and capacity to the positions to which they are deployed. But cadre deployment also places emphasis on the need for us to ensure that the comrades who get deployed to the strategic positions in government, they do have the requisite skills and that they do have the requisite experience to execute the tasks which have been allocated to them. We've been embarking on this project of strengthening the capacity of the provincial government for the past 22 years, and we can see the results thereof. As I'm speaking to you now, there's more than 1,000 infrastructure projects implemented by both municipalities and the provincial government, which will be able to mitigate the impact of the economic downturn that have negatively affected the ANC, that have negatively affected the Northern Cape.
Let's quickly talk about Eskom there in the province. Recently, some of the municipalities, we have to say, some of them ANC-led in the province, they've had the electricity cut, the supply cut by Eskom. What steps are you putting in place to deal with this problem?
No, the reality of the matter is, and this is one of the issues that we took up with the National Department of Local Government. There are municipalities that are not viable. Municipalities in towns which we call as social grant towns. Very small municipalities where there is no job opportunities, where there is no substantial source of income for the municipalities. We have engaged in a process with Eskom of ensuring that Eskom does not take that route of cutting off those municipalities from the grid. The Department of Cooperative Governance had meetings on various occasions with Eskom, and we are very confident in that process, and we are very confident that we will be able to find a resolution to the problem.
Thank you very much for joining us. That is the ANC Provincial Secretary of the Northern Cape, Zamani Saul, joining us this morning, talking about all the issues facing the province ahead of Of course, it's an election year, local government election year in South Africa. Now, the University of Fort Hare, well, it turned 100 years old this week, actually. It was on Monday, the 8th of February. The institution prides itself on producing outstanding men and women. The list is endless and includes amongst them leading statesmen like Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, former South African President and international icon Nelson Mandela, IFP leader Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, to name just a few. Let's go back to the celebrations and take a listen to what some of these leaders and alumni had to say about the university.
I remain indebted for all time to Fort Hare.
Going to Fort Hare was really in a way, a very carefree time, but also a very serious time.
I still believe that I'm part and parcel of this university.
The University of Fort Hare is the university of my dream.
I always had the impression and the feeling that if I came to Fort Hare, I would be able to first and foremost meet people from all over Africa, because Fort Hare has that history of being a truly continental university.
The history of Fort Hare, that's what you have asked me to talk about. But can you separate the history of South Africa from what took place around Fort Hare? But Fort Hare itself has a wonderful history.
Mandela, Nelson, Mugabe, Robert, Tambo, Oliver, Sobukwe, Robert, Hani, Chris Kembisile, Buthelezi, Mangosuthu, Khama, Sirete, Mbeki, Govern.
I got to Fort Hare as a student in 1932. Those days we did matric at Fort Hare. The Fort Hare came about as an idea. Would you call them idealists? Or would you call them men of vision? Or would you call them dreamers?
During those days, the government took no interest whatsoever in African education. The buildings, school buildings, the equipment, the teachers were all the responsibility of missionaries. And that is how I got my education from grade 1 right up to the first 2 years of university at Fort Hare. I didn't have to choose to go to Fort Hare because it was the only educational institution which offered degrees for Africans in this country. We could not be admitted in any other university in the country, so there was no choice.
Not in any way intending to suggest that Fort Hare was a second choice or a last resort or anything like that. There was, on the other hand, very little available to us by way of university education. Natal University was right on our doorstep, but as Indians, we weren't admitted unless we chose to go to those special classes established for non-Europeans in the backyards of Sastry College and so on. And some of us certainly didn't want to do that, not if we could help it. And we'd heard a great deal about Fort Hare, and I was most excited about coming to Fort Hare.
Anyone who wanted to pursue his or her secondary education had to go down south. And that's why many of us during those days who had sponsorship or had parental support went to South Africa, to places like Adams College, Marion Hill, many others in South Africa. Tiger Clove is one, Lovedale another.
There was a gentleman from Botswana who came to Fort Hare after the community had sold cattle in order to send him to Fort Hare. And he became one of the illustrious people of his society. And so communities really did play a great role. There was also the encouragement. I remember whenever you went off, when you came back on holiday, you went through the community to go and greet every auntie and every grandma to see how you are doing and to make sure that you don't get your head in the clouds and be proud.
If I didn't have a bursary, I wouldn't have been able to go to university. My father was not all that rich to be able to afford me going to university. So, but he contributed towards it, but the bursary helped a lot too. And the bursary came from, of course, the government of what was then Natal, but also, of course, from the communities who contributed towards the education fund, education bursary. So it was a community sort of support.
I was not happy with the students that Fort Hare was producing. These students used to major in English or major in ethics or something like that. And as we said in later years, when I became a senior student involved in student politics, we used to say Fort Hare had been turning out black Englishmen because those English was the thing. And we started revolutionizing, as it were, Fort Hare from inside.
Fort Hare was a very politically active place, so if you had come from a background where it wasn't that way, you really got steeped into the politics and high politics, people reading all kinds of books and so on.
A lot of discussion, a lot of reading. We had Gandhi mainly as a figure, a revolutionary figure, whose ideas we could adopt, and whose actions we also could follow, and so politically, that was the thinking for some of us who were political, and not every student was necessarily political.
Fort Hare really was a very, very special place in the sense that I don't think that anyone could stay there and be the same after staying there, especially as far as being sensitized to the problems that face black people and the oppression of black people generally.
What you find in all those who had gone through Fort Hare, commitment to principle, commitment to, the revolution. In retrospect now, when colonialism has been defeated, apartheid has been defeated, we'll look back and say, this is what we fought for. True, we are not together with those who died in the struggle, but those of us who have remained to see it, we feel that we suffered for this real, I don't know what to call it, but you couldn't get it any other way without. It's not a gift. It's an objective that you had to fight for and sacrifice for. So we have that background. It makes us see things the same way.
Fort Hare is great, my dear friend. Fort Hare is great.
Talk looks into the increase of suicide and symptoms leading to suicide.
The death wish grows when you go into depression after a lot of stress.
And often when we talk about suicide, we don't talk about a person wanting to stop living, but rather wanting to stop living in pain.
After losing everything in life that lead you to no options but suicide.
I had that spirit of fear in me to say, don't even face tomorrow.
After being overwhelmed with stress and trauma, it becomes difficult to have self-control.
People learning tools and skills that will practically enable them to meet these challenges.
In trying times, never be alone. Reach out for help to a better solution.
Support should be done by a counselor or psychologist where you're able to speak about how you're feeling in a safe, accepting, non-judgmental space.
For all your health tips, join Dr. Silo Mutawuni every Saturday from 9 till 10.
Welcome back. Bringing our top story for this sports bulletin, and its Kaizer Chiefs have jumped into third place on the Premiership log ahead of Black Aces after a narrow 1-0 win over Bidvest Wits. Wits' coach Gavin Hunt called the result embarrassing after the hosts dominated large parts of the game, while Kompela said there's no space for comments in the results table.
Kaizer Chiefs struggled to find their rhythm in the first half, which resulted in them having no shots on target. On the other hand, the home side had a good start and almost opened the score in the 12th minute. Ben Motswari came close from a corner, but his effort hit the wrong side of the post. Spiwe Shabalala's free kick from outside the box failed to trouble the keeper. Bidvest piled up the pressure on Chiefs through Mahlambi, but still failed to find the back of the net.
Mahlambi, still Mahlambi!
Chiefs slowly found their rhythm in the second half, and Josh Maluleke put them ahead from a free kick.
Yes, it will, and it's a great goal. It really is. Lack of concentration in the ball for Bidvest, Maluleke.
Peterson made crucial saves to keep Chiefs in the match. First, he tipped a 24-yard free kick over the post, and later, he denied James Keane from close range.
James Keane! Penis over the crate saying Coutinho does the tidying up.
In the end, Chiefs grabbed all maximum points.
Now here's a quick look at what's ahead for tonight. As you can see, the result 1-0 for Kaizer Chiefs out at the Bidvest Stadium. Tonight is the Orlando Pirates against the log leaders, and some people are already saying champions-elect, Mamelodi Sundowns, at 7:30 kickoff at Orlando Stadium. In Athlone, Black Aces were also chasing hard on the heels of Sundowns and Wits up against Ajax Cape Town at Athlone Stadium. Both matches kicking off at 7:30. Let's have a quick look at the top 8 of the log right now. As you can see, just a quick shift between Kaizer Chiefs and Black Aces, number 3 and number 4. And Black Aces have got a match on tonight. We'll see whether they actually stay in that position or not. And Sundowns, they're running away with it. They're 6 points clear of Bidvest Wits, and they really needed to win that match, did Wits, to stay in the hunt for the title race. Now, FIFA presidential candidate Tokyo Sexwale says he's unfazed by the decision by CAF's executive to not endorse him as their candidate in FIFA's presidential election coming up in 2 weeks' time. To talk about this, we had sports journalist Mark Omer in studio with us yesterday. First, he started by giving us his thoughts on the reasoning behind CAF's rejection of Tokyo Sexwale.
At face value, it may look like Africa is rejecting its own son. But in the bigger scheme of things, Africa has always worked with Asia. The combined vote of Africa and Asia is 100 out of 209. But the African solidarity with Asia goes back a long way to 1955, the Bandar Conference, where the leading lights of this solidarity were people like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Gamal Nasser of Egypt, Jawaharlal Nehru of India, Bruce Tito of Yugoslavia, and Sukarno. And there was a signing of MOU that as people who had faced colonialism and had been marginalized in world affairs, there would always come a solidarity between the two, and they would sign an MOU, what's called Memorandum of Understanding, so that, and they agree on specific goals with specific time frames. Now, fast forward to last year, Qatar, specifically Qatar Football Federation, came to CAF and said, we want to work and cooperate on ABC. If you go to CAF, if you go to Qatar, they will give you and they'll tell you this is what we are, with time frames. Late last year, CECAFA in East Africa had a memorandum of understanding with the Saudi Arabia Football Federation. So the signing of an MOU between the African and Asian football confederations in Kigali, to us doesn't come as a surprise. It's not about Kendo or Mark or Tokyo. It's about the bigger picture. And as people who came from subjugation, we realize that individual ambition is sometimes used to divide us and mislead us. So that is the context in which we should look at why CAF made the decision it made.
Which then brings us to the question that between Al Khalifa of Bahrain and Tokyo Sexwale of South Africa, they were going with the Bahraini candidate, that he was stronger, which then begs the question, was Tokyo Sexwale's candidacy ever strong enough to compete on that stage?
There are actually three, because you've left out Jordan's Ali Al-Hussein, because they are children of the Africa-Asia solidarity. Now, there must have been consultations that went behind the scenes, and they have enumerated what they want to go. It's very important for Africa and Asia to come together, and South America, by the way. It's only CONMEBOL, Central America, that is talking about supporting Infantino. But South America is also on board, because the distribution of wealth in the football global economy is the most unfair in all sports, and it disadvantages Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So to allow a situation where somebody from Western Europe, the affluent Western Europe, comes to power is a very dangerous precedent for Africa.
Now, Tokyo has come out and said that he doesn't believe that the executive of CAF rejecting his candidacy is the end of the road for him. He still believes that he's got a chance to actually walk into the election and possibly win. These are his stated words.
Theoretically, he's correct. Theoretically. But I can tell you, the bulk, I said Africa and Asia combined is 100 votes. More than 85 will go towards Khalifa, you see. And what I would have loved to see is that it's not the end of the road for both Tokyo and Ali. Ali is the Jordan FA president and the West Asia Confederation president. He has a role to play. Tokyo is playing a significant role in this process to get the Palestinians and the Israeli football people to go about their business in a sort of normal way in an apartheid environment, you see. So in a few more years, there will be, these are elective posts, but we must understand that the FIFA chair is not about who is sitting on the chair. It's about, for us in Africa and Asia and Latin America, it's about there are certain goals we need to achieve. So whoever we put there serves those particular interests.
Just this morning, there were reports that some members of CAF were rejecting the selection of the Bahraini sheikh as the endorsed candidate.
They are not forced to vote. And even when the Suketu Patel stated that he said this is our preferred candidate, he didn't say go and vote this way.
What is likely to happen?
Well, the way I see it is the bulk, once they have reached this kind of decision, the bulk of Africa and Asia will vote according to the way the Confederation, because remember that the executive of Confederation of Africa is an elected body. It is these very federations that gave that mandate to the executive. So that's what I would see. And I see a situation where it would have been wise for both Ali and Tokyo to accept this and say, look, we have got roles to play. Next time there's an opportunity. But it's up to them. They are free and they're well within their right to say, we are going to the very end.
For 30 seconds or less, what do you think he should be doing?
I think that Tokyo should look to the next opportunity. If he so wished, because you see there is also personal pride involved, there is also personal self-esteem. My view is that let him focus more on the role he's playing in the Palestinian-Israel football situation. That's a very good platform which at a later stage he can use. Then when he comes back to South Africa, let them start mending fences with the football fraternity, first within the SADC region, the COSAFA region, and then going on to the Africa region.
And to close off the sports show, we bring you cricket news. Just 1 month away from the T20 Cricket World Cup, an inexperienced Sri Lanka seam attack defeated India by 5 wickets in their first T20 international in Pune, India.
Oh, in the air at second. What a start. Second ball.
Sri Lanka won the toss and opted to bowl first on a green top. Kasun Rajita, on debut, picked up 2 wickets in his first over. That put the skids on the Indian innings, and the home side never recovered.
And he completes the catch. Again, using the bottom hand to very good effect.
Only Suresh Raina offered any resistance at the top of the Indian batting order. Once Raina departed, it was a procession back to the shed. Ravi Ashwin wagged the tail, but ran out of batting partners on 31.
And it's a biggie, sixer.
In their chase, Sri Lanka lost a wicket in their first over.
But this time, it's gone.
Another wicket fell soon after, but this was not enough to derail the tourists. A captain's knock from Dinesh Chandimal steadied the ship. Sri Lanka cantered to a 5-wicket victory with 2 overs to spare.
Well, that's quite a shot there to seal it for Sri Lanka. Well played.
They meet again.
And that's where we're going to leave it with the sports. Up next, the weather forecast.
Hello again. Yes, thanks to Sportscaster for carrying us through to the end of the show. Of course, we asked this question today, Elvis. I was surprised there wasn't a lot of traction on Twitter with regards to the question, and this leads us to the idea that we had around rhino fatigue that we discussed with Bonnie de Bod over the last month or so. It really seems as if people aren't really that interested anymore.
Tired of hearing about the rhino, but you know there's a legacy that we need to uphold here. There's the big 5, and the rhino is gone. We'll only have the big 4. I mean, you know. But here's a comment here on Facebook.
A Facebook comment, this one from Ian Spuddy McDonald. It's quite a long one, but in essence what he's saying, farming is the only way to go, but there must be a controlled value chain from farmer to consumer. It's easy. Track the horn by the DNA. The registered farmers with DNA rhinos will sell to a single SA buy-sell office that only buys horn from registered farmers and sells to a single Chinese. I don't think Chinese is the right one. But we get the gist of it, of the story. The value chain has to be policed 100% in order for us to, well, have success with the idea of rhino farming. But Kendall, what's your thoughts on legalizing rhino horn trade and farming rhinos per se?
Well, I'd say it's similar to what's been done in the United States with marijuana and across different parts of the world.
Kendall, with marijuana?
I would say that because it's actually making a difference. It's something that you can control, it's something that you can bring into the fold, and I think it should happen.
Legalize is what Kendall says.
Well, there you have it. There's some that feel that rhino farming is not the way to go. You know, conservation is the way to go, but we've seen that doesn't work. Conservation methods doesn't
farming
really
should
work.
be part of an overall conservation process.
Exactly.
One would think it's not one thing or the other. Of course,
should be incorporated all together.
If one looks at the public right now, it seems as if we've got rhino fatigue. We're not really that interested, and that's a very dangerous thing for the rhino on the African continent.
But anyways, that's all we have for you here today. We'll be back, same time, same place tomorrow, right here on Newsroom. For myself, Elvis Presley.
And me, Kendall Bakamate.
Eben Jansen. We'll see you tomorrow.
Arrivederci.
For victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
SABC News. We report, contextualize, and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly, and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful, and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate, and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
In Africa, technology has created many new ways of doing things.
ICT is an increasingly important part of everybody's life.
It's being used in education, for social media, and now for farming too.
The best thing about internet for a farmer is that we get to share information.
On Network, we give you all the important African technology and social media news. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
Are you saying the king must go to jail? You are not royal blood, therefore you are going to serve time on behalf of the king. Where does the public protector stand on this matter? Are you with the marches, for the marches, against the march? If this is your ancestor, it is very much his ancestor as well, because this is the cradle of humankind. Is there God somewhere in your science? Drinking the blood of a person with albinism gives extra magical powers. A man of the cloth is involved here, because it would mean that somehow religion is being brought into this part of the myth. What do you say to me?
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.